Section 9 of Gleanings in Buddha Fields. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Avai in April 2018. Gleanings in Buddha Fields by Lafcadio Hearn. Chapter 7. In Osaka. Part 2. In powerful contrast to the ancient structures of Tennoji are the vast Nishi and Higashi Honganji, almost exact counterparts of the Nishi and Higashi Honganji of Tokyo. Nearly every great city of Japan has a pair of such Honganji, temples of the true vow, one belonging to the western, Nishi, the other to the eastern, Higashi branch of this great Shin sect, founded in the 13th century. Footnote. The division of the sect during the 17th century into two branches had a political, not a religious cause, and the sections remain religiously united. Their abbots are of imperial descent, whence their title of Monseki, or imperial offspring. Travelers may observe that the walls enclosing the temple grounds of this sect bear the same decorative mouldings as those of the walls of the imperial residences. End footnote. Varying in dimension according to the wealth and religious importance of the locality, but usually built upon the same general plan, they may be said to represent the most modern and the most purely Japanese form of Buddhist architecture, immense, dignified, magnificent. But they likewise represent the almost Protestant severity of the rite in regard to symbols, icons, and external forms. Their plain and ponderous gates are never guarded by the giant Ni-O. There is no swarming of dragons and demons under their enormous eaves. No golden hosts of Buddhas or Bodhisattvas rise, rank on rank, by tiers of aureoles through the twilight of their sanctuaries. No curious or touching witnesses of grateful faith are ever suspended from their high ceilings, or hung before their altars, or fastened to the gratings of their doorways. They contain no ex-votos, no paper knots recording prayer, no symbolic image but one, and that usually small, the figure of Amida. Probably the reader knows that the Honganji sect represents a movement in Buddhism not altogether unlike that which Unitarianism represents in liberal Christianity. In its rejection of celibacy and of all ascetic practices, its prohibition of charms, divinations, votive offerings, and even of all prayer excepting prayer for salvation, its insistence upon industrious effort as the duty of life, its maintenance of the sanctity of marriage as a religious bond, its doctrine of one eternal Buddha as Father and Savior, its promise of paradise after death as the immediate reward of a good life, and, above all, in its educational zeal, the religion of the sect of the Pure Land may be justly said to have much in common with the progressive forms of Western Christianity, and it has certainly won the respect of the few men of culture who find their way into the missionary legion. Judged by its wealth, its respectability, and its antagonism to the grosser forms of Buddhist superstition, it might be supposed the least emotional of all forms of Buddhism. But in some respect it is probably the most emotional. No other Buddhist sect can make such appeals to the faith and love of the common people as those which brought into being the amazing Eastern Honganji temple of Kyoto. Yet, while able to reach the simplest minds by special methods of doctrinal teaching, the Honganji cult can make equally strong appeal to the intellectual classes by reason of its scholarship. Not a few of its priests are graduates of the leading universities of the West, and some have won European reputations in various departments of Buddhist learning. Whether the older Buddhist sects are likely to dwindle away before the constantly increasing power of the Shinshu is at least an interesting question. Certainly the latter has everything in its favor: imperial recognition, wealth, culture, and solidity of organization. On the other hand, one is tempted to doubt the efficacy of such advantages in a warfare against habits of thought and feeling older by many centuries than Shinshu. Perhaps the Occident furnishes a precedent on which to base predictions. Remembering how strong Roman Catholicism remains today, how little it has changed since the days of Luther, how impotent our progressive creeds to satisfy the old spiritual hunger for some visible object of worship, something to touch or put close to the heart, it becomes difficult to believe that the iconolatry of the more ancient Buddhist sects will not continue for hundreds of years to keep a large place in popular affection. Again, it is worthy of remark that one curious obstacle to the expansion of the Shinshu is to be found in a very deeply rooted race feeling on the subject of self-sacrifice. Although much corruption undoubtedly exists in the older sects, although numbers of their priests do not even pretend to observe the vows regarding diet and celibacy, the ancient ideals are by no means dead, and the majority of Japanese Buddhists still disapprove of the relatively pleasurable lives of the Shinshu priesthood. In some of the remoter provinces, where Shinshu is viewed with especial disfavor, one may often hear children singing a naughty song, Shinshu Bozu Emon Da, which may thus be freely rendered: Shinshu priest to be, what a nice thing. Wife has, child has, good fish eats. It reminded me of those popular criticisms of Buddhist conduct uttered in the time of the Buddha himself, and so often recorded in the Vinaya texts, almost like a refrain. Then the people were annoyed, and they murmured and complained, saying, "These act like men who are still enjoying the pleasures of this world," and they told the thing to the Blessed One. Besides Tennoji, Osaka has many famous temples, both Buddhist and Shinto, with very ancient history. Of such is Kozu no Yashiro, where the people pray to the spirit of Nintoku, most beloved in memory of all Japanese emperors. He had a place on the same hill where his shrine now stands, and this site, whence a fine view of the city can be obtained, is the scene of a pleasing legend preserved in the Kojiki. Thereupon the heavenly sovereign, ascending a lofty mountain and looking on the land all round, spoke, saying, "In the whole land there rises no smoke, the land is all poverty-stricken. So I remit all the people's taxes and forced labor from now till 3 years hence." Thereupon the great palace became dilapidated, and the rain leaked in everywhere, but no repairs were made. The rain that leaked in was caught in troughs, and the inmates removed to places where there was no leakage. When later the heavenly sovereign looked upon the land, the smoke was abundant in the land. So, finding the people rich, he now exacted taxes and forced labor. Therefore the peasantry prospered and did not suffer from the forced labor. So, in praise of that august reign, it was called the Reign of the Emperor Sage. That was 1500 years ago. Now, could the good emperor see, from his shrine of Kozu, as thousands must believe he does, the smoke of modern Osaka, he might well think, "My people are becoming too rich." Outside of the city there is a still more famous Shinto temple, Sumiyoshi, dedicated to certain sea gods who aided the Empress Jingo to conquer Korea. At Sumiyoshi there are pretty child priestesses, and beautiful grounds, and an enormous pond spanned by a bridge so humped that, to cross it without taking off your shoes, you must cling to the parapet. At Sakai there is the Buddhist temple of Myokokuji, in the garden of which are some very old palm trees. One of them, removed by Nobunaga in the 16th century, is said to have cried out and lamented until it was taken back to the temple. You see the ground under these palms covered with what looks like a thick, shiny, disordered mass of fur, half reddish and half silvery gray. It is not fir. It is a heaping of millions of needles thrown there by pilgrims to feed the palms, because these trees are said to love iron and to be strengthened by absorbing its rust. Speaking of trees, I may mention the Naniwaya Kasamatsu, or hat pine, not so much because it is an extraordinary tree, as because it supports a large family who keep a little tea house on the road to Sakai. The branches of the tree have been trained outwards and downwards over a framework of poles, so that the whole presents the appearance of an enormous green hat of the shape worn by peasants and called kasa. The pine is scarcely 6 feet high, but covers perhaps 20 square yards, its trunk, of course, not being visible at all from outside the framework supporting the branches. Many people visit the house to look at the pine and drink a cup of tea, and nearly every visitor buys some memento of it, perhaps a woodcut of the tree, or a printed copy of verses written by some poet in praise of it, or a girl's hairpin, the top of which is a perfect little green model of the tree, framework of poles and all, with one tiny stork perched on it. The owners of the Naniwaya, as their tea house is called, are not only able to make a good living, but to educate their children by the exhibition of this tree and the sale of such mementos. I do not intend to tax my readers' patience by descriptions of the other famous temples of Osaka, several of which are enormously old and have most curious legends attached to them. But I may venture a few words about the cemetery of the Temple of One Soul, or better, perhaps, the Temple of a Single Mind, Ishinji. The monuments there are the most extraordinary I ever saw. Near the main gate is the tomb of a wrestler, Asahigoro Hachiro. His name is chiseled upon a big disk of stone, probably weighing a ton, and this disk is supported on the back of a stone image of a wrestler, a grotesque figure with gilded eyes starting from their sockets, and features apparently distorted by effort. It is a very queer thing, half comical, half furious of aspect. Close by is the tomb of one Hirayama Hambe, a monument shaped like a hyotan, that is to say, like a wine gourd such as travelers use for carrying sake. The most usual form of hyotan resembles that of an hourglass, except that the lower part is somewhat larger than the upper, and the vessel can only stand upright when full or partly full, so that in a Japanese song the wine lover is made to say to his gourd, "With you I fall." Apparently the mighty to drink wine have a district all to themselves in this cemetery, for there are several other monuments of like form in the same row, also one shaped like a very large sake bottle, Ishodokuri, on which is inscribed a verse not taken from the sutras. But the oddest monument of all is a great stone badger, sitting upright and seeming to strike its belly with its forepaws. On the belly is cut a name, Inoue Denosuke, together with the verse Tsuki no yoshi, nembutsu tonaite, hara tsutsumi, which means about as follows: "On fine moonlit nights, repeating the nembutsu, I play the belly drum." The flower vases are in the form of sake bottles. Artificial rockwork supports the monument, and here and there among the rocks are smaller figures of badgers, dressed like Buddhist priests, tanuki bozu. My readers probably know that the Japanese tanuki is credited with the power of assuming human shape, and of making musical sounds like the booming of a hand drum by tapping upon its belly. It is said often to disguise itself as a Buddhist priest for mischievous purposes, and to be very fond of sake. Of course, such images in a cemetery represent nothing more than eccentricities, and are judged to be in bad taste. One is reminded of certain jocose paintings and inscriptions upon Greek and Roman tombs, expressing in regard to death, or rather in regard to life, a sentiment, or an affectation of sentiment, repellent to modern feeling. 5. I said in a former essay that a Japanese city is little more than a wilderness of wooden sheds, and Osaka is no exception. But interiorly, a very large number of the frail wooden dwellings of any Japanese city are works of art, and perhaps no city possesses more charming homes than Osaka. Kyoto is, indeed, more richer in gardens, there being comparatively little space for gardens in Osaka, but I am speaking of the houses only. Exteriorly, a Japanese street may appear little better than a row of wooden barns or stables, but the interior of any dwelling in it may be a wonder of beauty. Usually the outside of a Japanese house is not at all beautiful, though it may have a certain pleasing oddity of form, and in many cases the walls of the rear or sides are covered with charred boards, of which the blackened and hardened surfaces are said to resist heat and damp better than any coating of paint or stucco could do. Except perhaps the outside of a coal shed, nothing dingier looking could be imagined. But the other side of the black walls may be an aesthetic delight. The comparative cheapness of the residence does not much affect this possibility, for the Japanese excel all nations in obtaining the maximum of beauty with the minimum of cost, while the most industrially advanced of Western peoples, the practical Americans, have yet only succeeded in obtaining the minimum of beauty with the maximum of cost. Much about Japanese interiors can be learned from Morse's Japanese Homes, but even that admirable book gives only the black and white notion of the subject, and more than half of the charm of such interiors is the almost inexplicable caress of color. To illustrate Mr. Morse's work so as to interpret the colorific charm would be a dearer and more difficult feat than the production of Racinet's Costume historique. Even thus the subdued luminosity, the tone of perfect repose, the revelations of delicacy and daintiness waiting the eye in every nook of chambers seemingly contrived to catch and keep the feeling of perpetual summer, would remain unguessed. 5 years ago I wrote that a little acquaintance with the Japanese art of flower arrangement had made it impossible for me to endure the sight of that vulgarity, or rather brutality, which in the West we call a bouquet. Today I must add that familiarity with Japanese interiors has equally disgusted me with Occidental interiors, no matter how spacious or comfortable or richly furnished. Returning now to Western life, I should feel like Thomas the Rhymer revisiting a world of ugliness and sorrow after 7 years of fairyland. It is possible, as has been alleged, though I cannot believe it, that Western artists have little more to learn from the study of Japanese pictorial art. But I am quite sure that our house builders have universes of facts to learn, especially as regards the treatment and tinting of surfaces, from the study of Japanese interiors. Whether the countless styles of these interiors can even be classed appears to me a doubtful question. I do not think that in 100,000 Japanese houses there are 2 interiors precisely alike, excluding, of course, the homes of the poorest classes, for the designer never repeats himself when he can help it. The lesson he has to teach is the lesson of perfect taste combined with inexhaustible variety. Taste! What a rare thing it is in our Western world, and how independent of material, how intuitive, how incommunicable to the vulgar. But taste is a Japanese birthright. It is everywhere present, though varying in quality of development according to conditions, and the inheritance depending upon conditions. The average Occidental recognizes only the commoner forms of it, chiefly those made familiar by commercial export. And, as a general rule, what the West most admires in Japanese conventional taste is thought rather vulgar in Japan. Not that we are wrong in admiring whatever is beautiful in itself. Even the design printed in tints upon a 2-cent towel may be really great pictures. They are sometimes made by excellent artists. But the aristocratic severity of the best Japanese taste, the exquisite complexity of its refinements in the determination of proportion, quality, tone, restraint, has never yet been dreamt of by the West. Nowhere is this taste so finely exhibited as in private interiors, particularly in regard to color. The rules of color in the composition of a set of rooms are not less exacting than the rules of color in the matter of dress, though permitting considerable variety. The mere tones of a private house are enough to indicate its owner's degree of culture. There is no painting, no varnishing, no wallpapering, only staining and polishing of particular parts, and a sort of paper border about 15 inches broad fixed along the bottom of a wall to protect it during cleaning and dusting operations. The plastering may be made with sands of different hues, or with fragments of shell and nacre, or with quartz crystal, or with mica. The surface may imitate granite, or may sparkle like copper pyrites, or may look exactly like a rich mass of bark. But, whatever the material, the tint given must show the same faultless taste that rules in the tints of silks for robes and girdles. As yet, all this interior world of beauty, just because it is an interior world, is closed to the foreign tourist. He can find at most only suggestions of it in the rooms of such old-fashioned inns or tea-houses as he may visit in the course of his travels. I wonder how many foreign travelers understand the charm of a Japanese inn, or even think how much is done to please them, not merely in the matter of personal attentions, but in making beauty for their eyes. Multitudes write of their petty vexations, their personal acquaintance with fleas, their personal dislikes and discomforts, but how many write of the charm of that alcove where every day fresh flowers are placed, arranged as no European florist could ever learn to arrange flowers, and where there is sure to be some object of real art, whether in bronze, lacquer, or porcelain, together with a picture suited to the feeling of the time and season. These little aesthetic gratifications, though never charged for, ought to be kindly remembered when the gift of tea money is made. I have been in hundreds of Japanese hotels, and I remember only one in which I could find nothing curious or pretty, a ramshackle shelter hastily put up to catch custom at a newly opened railway station. A word about the alcove of my room in Osaka. The wall was covered only with a mixture of sand and metallic filings of some sort, but it looked like a beautiful surface of silver ore. To the pillar was fastened a bamboo cup containing a pair of exquisite blossoming sprays of wisteria, one pink and the other white. The kakemono, made with a few very bold strokes by a master brush, pictured 2 enormous crabs about to fight after vainly trying to get out of each other's way, and the humor of the thing was enhanced by a few Chinese characters signifying woko sekai, or everything goes crookedly in this world. 7. My last day in Osaka was given to shopping, chiefly in the districts of the toy makers and of the silk merchants. A Japanese acquaintance, himself a shopkeeper, took me about and showed me extraordinary things until my eyes ached. We went to a famous silk house, a tumultuous place so crowded that we had some trouble to squeeze our way to the floor platform, which, in every Japanese shop, serves at once for chairs and counter. Scores of barefooted, light-limbed boys were running over it, bearing bundles of merchandise to customers, for in such shops there is no shelving of stocks. The Japanese salesman never leaves his squatting place on the mats, but, on learning what you want, he shouts an order, and boys presently run to you with armfuls of samples. After you have made your choice, the goods are rolled up again by the boys and carried back into the fireproof storehouses behind the shop. At the time of our visit, the greater part of the matted floor space was one splendid shimmering confusion of tossed silks and velvets of 100 colors and 100 prices. Near the main entrance an elderly superintendent, plump and jovial of aspect like the god of wealth, looked after arriving customers. Two keen-eyed men, standing upon an elevation in the middle of the shop, and slowly turning round and round in opposite directions, kept watch for thieves, and other watchers were posted at the side doors. Japanese shop thieves, by the way, are very clever, and I am told that nearly every large store loses considerably by them in the course of the year. In a side wing of the building, under a low skylight, I saw busy ranks of bookkeepers, cashiers, and correspondents squatting before little desks less than 2 feet high. Each of the numerous salesmen was attending to many customers at once. The rush of business was big, and the rapidity with which the work was being done testified to the excellence of the organization established. I asked how many persons the firm employed, and my friend replied, "Probably about 200 here. There are several branch houses. In this shop the work is very hard, but the working hours are shorter than in most of the silk houses, not more than 12 hours a day." "What about salaries?" I inquired. "No salaries." "Is all the work of this firm done without pay?" "Perhaps one or two of the very cleverest salesmen may get something, not exactly a salary, but a little special remuneration every month. And the old superintendent, he has been 40 years in the house, gets a salary. The rest get nothing but their food." "Good food?" "No, very cheap, coarse food. After a man has served his time here, 14 or 15 years, he may be helped to open a small store of his own." "Are the conditions the same in all the shops of Osaka?" "Yes, everywhere the same. But now many of the detchi are graduates of commercial schools. Those sent to a commercial school begin their apprenticeship much later, and they are said not to make such good detchi as those taught from childhood." "A Japanese clerk in a foreign store is much better off." "We do not think so," answered my friend very positively. "Some who speak English well and have learned the foreign way of doing business may get $50 or $60 a month for 7 or 8 hours work a day. But they are not treated the same way as they are treated in a Japanese house. Clever men do not like to work under foreigners. Foreigners used to be very cruel to their Japanese clerks and servants." "But not now?" I queried. "Perhaps not often. They have found that it is dangerous. But they used to beat and kick them. Japanese think it shameful to even speak unkindly to detchi or servants. In a house like this there is no unkindness. The owners and the superintendents never speak roughly. You see how very hard all these men and boys are working without pay. No foreigner could get Japanese to work like that, even for big wages. I have worked in foreign houses, and I know." It is not exaggeration to say that most of the intelligent service rendered in Japanese trade and skilled industry is unsalaried. Perhaps 1/3 of the business work of the country is done without wages, the relation between master and servant being one of perfect trust on both sides, and absolute obedience being assured by the simplest of moral conditions. This fact was the fact most deeply impressed upon me during my stay in Osaka. I found myself wondering about it while the evening train to Nara was bearing me away from the cheery turmoil of the great metropolis. I continued to think of it while watching the deepening of the dusk over the leagues of roofs, over the mustering of factory chimneys forever sending up their offering of smoke to the shrine of good Nintoku. Suddenly above the out-twinkling of countless lamps, above the white star-points of electric lights, above the growing dusk itself, I saw, rising glorified into the last red splendor of sunset, the marvelous old pagoda of Tennoji. And I asked myself whether the faith it symbolized had not helped to create that spirit of patience and love and trust upon which have been founded all the wealth and energy and power of the mightiest city of Japan. End of section 9.
Section 10 of Gleanings in Buddha Fields. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Corinne LePage. Gleanings in Buddha Fields, Chapter 8. Buddhist Allusions in Japanese Folk Song. Perhaps only a Japanese representative of the older culture could fully inform us to what degree the mental soil of the race has been saturated and fertilized by Buddhist idealism. At all events, no European could do so, for to understand the whole relation of Far Eastern religion to Far Eastern life would require not only such scholarship, but also such experience as no European could gain in a lifetime. Yet for even the Western stranger, there are everywhere signs of what Buddhism has been to Japan in the past. All the arts and most of the industries repeat Buddhist legends to the eye trained in symbolism, and there is scarcely an object of handiwork possessing any beauty or significance of form, from the plaything of a child to the heirloom of a prince, which does not, in some way, proclaim the ancient debt to Buddhism of the craft that made it. One may discern Buddhist thoughts in the cheap cotton prints from an Osaka mill not less than in the figured silks of Kyoto, the reliefs upon an iron kettle, or the elephant heads of bronze making the handles of a shopkeeper's hibachi, the patterns of screen paper, or the commonest ornamental woodwork of a gateway, the etchings upon a metal pipe, or the enameling upon a costly vase, may all relate with equal eloquence the traditions of faith. There are reflections or echoes of Buddhist teaching in the composition of a garden, in the countless ideographs of the long vistas of shop signs, in the wonderfully expressive names given to certain fruits and flowers, in the appellations of mountains, capes, waterfalls, villages, even of modern railway stations. And the new civilization would not yet seem to have much affected the influence thus manifested. Trains and steamers now yearly carry to famous shrines more pilgrims than visited them ever before in a 12-month. The temple bells still, in despite of clocks and watches, mark the passing of time for the millions. The speech of the people is still poetized with Buddhist utterances. Literature and drama still teem with Buddhist expressions, and the most ordinary voices of the street, songs of children playing, a chorus of laborers at their toil, even cries of itinerant street vendors, often recall to me some memory of saints and bodhisattvas, or the text of some sutra. Such an experience first gave me the idea of making a collection of songs containing Buddhist expressions or allusions, but in view of the extent of the subject, I could not at once decide where to begin. A bewildering variety of Japanese songs, a variety of which the mere nomenclature would occupy pages, offers material of this description. Among noteworthy kinds may be mentioned the utai, dramatic songs mostly composed by high priests, of which probably no 10 lines are without some allusion to Buddhism, the naga-uta, songs of extraordinary length, and the joruri, whole romances in verse, with which professional singers can delight their audiences for 5 or 6 hours at a time. The mere dimension of such compositions necessarily excluded them from my plan, but there remained a legion of briefer forms to choose among. I resolved at last to limit my undertaking mainly to dodoitsu, little songs of 26 syllables only, arranged in 4 lines, 7, 7, 7, 5, They are more regular in construction than the street songs treated of in a former paper, but they are essentially popular, and therefore more widely representative of Buddhist influences than many superior kinds of composition could be. Out of a very large number collected for me, I have selected between 40 and 50 as typical of the class. Perhaps those pieces which reflect the idea of pre-existence and of future rebirths will prove especially interesting to the Western reader, much less because of poetical worth than because of comparative novelty. We have very little English verse of any class containing fancies of this kind, but they swarm in Japanese poetry, even as commonplaces and conventionalisms. Such an exquisite thing as Rossetti's Sudden Light, bewitching us chiefly through the penetrative subtlety of a thought anathematized by all our orthodoxies for 1800 years, could interest a Japanese only as the exceptional rendering, by an Occidental, of fancies and feelings familiar to the most ignorant peasant. Certainly no one will be able to find in these Japanese verses, or rather in my own wretchedly prosy translations of them, even a hint of anything like the ghostly delicacy of Rossetti's imaginings. I have been here before, but when or how I cannot tell. I know the grass beyond the door, the sweet, keen smell, the sighing sound, the lights along the shore. You have been mine before. How long ago I may not know, but just when at that swallow's soar your neck turned so, some veil did fall. I knew it all of yore. Yet what a queer, living difference between such enigmatically delicate handling of thoughts classed as forbidden fruit in the Western Eden of dreams and the everyday Japanese utterances that spring directly out of ancient Eastern faith. Love, it is often said, has nothing to do with reason. The cause of ours must be some en in a previous birth. Footnote. Iro wa shiano, hokato wa edo, kore mo sakisho no, en de aro. En is a Buddhist word signifying affinity, relation of cause and effect from life to life. End of footnote. Even the knot of the rope tying our boats together, knotted was long ago by some love in a former birth. If the touching even of sleeves be through en of a former existence, very much deeper must be the en that unites us now. Footnote. Sode surio no mo, tasho no enyo, mashite futari ga fukai naka. Allusion is here made to the old Buddhist proverb, Sode no furi wase, motasho no en. Even the touching of sleeves in passing is caused by some affinity operating from former lives. End of footnote. Kuaho this life must be, this dwelling with one so tender. I am reaping now the reward of deeds in a former birth. Footnote. The Buddhist word kuaho is commonly used instead of other synonyms for karma, such as ingwa, innen, etc., to signify the good rather than the bad results of action in previous lives, but it is sometimes used in both meanings. Here it seems to be an allusion to the proverbial expression kuaho no yoi hito. Literal translation, a person of good kuaho, meaning a fortunate individual. End of footnote. Many songs of this class refer to the customary vow which lovers make to belong to each other for more lives than one. A vow perhaps originally inspired by the Buddhist aphorism, Oyako wa aise, fufu wa nise, shuju wa sanze. The relation of parent and child is for one life, that of wife and husband for 2 lives, that of master and servant for 3 lives. Although the tender relation is thus limited to the time of 2 lives, the vow, as Japanese dramas testify, and as the letters of those who kill themselves for love bear witness, is often passionately made for 7. The following selections show a considerable variety of tone, ranging from the pathetic to the satirical, in the treatment of this topic. I have cut my hair for his sake, but the deeper relation between us cannot be cut in this, nor yet in another life. Footnote. Kami wa kitemo, nise made kaketa, fukai nishi wa kiro mono ka. Literally, hair have cut although, two existences until, deep relation, cut how can it be? By the mention of the haircutting, we know the speaker is a woman. Her husband, or possibly betrothed lover, is dead, and according to the Buddhist custom, she signifies her desire to remain faithful to his memory by the sacrifice of her hair. For detailed information on this subject, see, in my Glimpses of Unfamiliar Japan, the chapter of Women's Hair. End of footnote. She looks at the portrait of him to whom for 2 lives she is promised. Happy remembrance has come, and each brings a smile to her face. Footnote. Nise tochigirishi, shashin no nagame, omai dashite, warigeyo. Literal translation. 2 existences that made alliance, photograph look at, thinking bring out smiling face. The use of the term shashin, photograph, shows that the poem is not old. End of footnote. If in this present life we never can hope for union, then we shall first keep house in the Lotos Palace beyond. Footnote. Totemo konoyode, so are nunabara, hasu no utenade, arasetai. Literal translation. By any means, this world in cannot live together if Lotos of Palace in new housekeeping. It is with this thought that lovers voluntarily die together, and the song might be called a song of Joshi. End of footnote. Have we not spoken the vow that binds for a double existence? If we must separate now, I can only wish to die. There, oh what shall we do? Pledged for a double existence, and now as we sit together, the string of the samisen snaps. Footnote. Among singing girls, it is believed that the snapping of a samisen string under such circumstances as those indicated in the above song is an omen of coming separation. End of footnote. He woos by teaching the law of cause and effect for 3 lives, and makes a contract for 2, the crafty smiling priest. Footnote. This song is of a priest who breaks the vow of celibacy. End of footnote. Every mortal has lived and is destined to live countless lives, yet the happy moments of any single existence are not therefore less precious in themselves. Not to have met one night is verily cause for sorrow, since twice in a single birth the same night never comes. But even as a summer unusually warm is apt to herald a winter of exceptional severity, so too much happiness in this life may signify great suffering in the next. Always I suffer thus. Methinks, in my last existence, too happy I must have been, did not suffer enough. Next in point of exotic interest to the songs expressing belief in pre-existence and rebirth, I think I should place those treating of the doctrine of ingwa or karma. I offer some free translations from these, together with one selection from a class of compositions more elaborate and usually much longer than the dodoitsu, called hauta. In the original, at least, my selection from the hauta, which contains a charming simile about the firefly, is by far the prettiest. Weep not, turn to me. Nay, all my suspicions vanish. Forgive me those words unkind. Some ingwa controlled my tongue. Evidently, this is the remorseful pleading of a jealous lover. The next might be the answer of the girl whose tears he had caused to flow. I cannot imagine at all by what strange manner of ingwa came I to fall in love with one so unkind as you. Or she might exclaim, "Is this the turning of En? Am I caught in the wheel of karma?" That, alas, is a wheel not to be moved from the rut. Footnote. Meguru enkaya, kerumo no watashi, hiku ni hikarinu, kono ingwa. There is a play on words in the original which I have not attempted to render. The idea is of an unhappy match, either betrothal or marriage, from which the woman wishes to withdraw when too late. End of footnote. A more remarkable reference to the wheel of karma is the following. Father and mother forbade, and so I gave up my lover, yet still with a whirl of the wheel, the thought of him comes and goes. Footnote. Oya no ikende, akira mete no, matamo rinye de, omoi dasu. The Buddhist word rinye, or rinten, has the meaning of turning the wheel, another expression for passing from birth to birth. The wheel here is the great circle of illusion, the whirl of karma. End of footnote. This is a hauta. Numberless insects there are that call from dawn to evening, crying, I love, but the firefly's silent passion, making its body burn, is deeper than all their longing. Even such is my love, yet I cannot think through what ingwa I opened my heart, alas, to a being not sincere. Footnote. Kai, kaito, nakamushi yorimo, nakanu hataru ga, mio kugasu, nan no ingwa de, jitsu naki hito ni, shinu o akashite, a kuyashi. Literal translation. I love, saying cry insects then. Better never cry firefly, body scorch. What karma because of? Sincerity not is man to. Inmost mind, opened. Ah, regret. It was formerly believed that the firefly's light really burned its own body. End of footnote. If the foregoing seem productions possible only to our psychological antipodes, it is quite otherwise with a group of folk songs reflecting the doctrine of impermanency. Concerning the instability of all material things and the hollowness of all earthly pleasures, Christian and Buddhist thought are very much in accord. The great difference between them appears only when we compare their teaching as to things ghostly, and especially as to the nature of the ego. But the Oriental doctrine that the ego itself is an impermanent compound, and that the self is not the true consciousness, rarely finds expression in these popular songs. For the common people the self exists. It is a real, though multiple, personality that passes from birth to birth. Only the educated Buddhist comprehends the deeper teaching that what we imagine to be self is wholly illusion, a darkening veil woven by karma, and that there is no self but the infinite self, the eternal absolute. In the following dodoitsu will be found mostly thoughts or emotions according with universal experience. Gathering clouds to the moon, storm and rain to the flowers, somehow this world of woe never is just as we like. Footnote. Tsuki ni murakumo, hana ni wa arashi, tokaku ikiyo wa, mama naranu. This song especially refers to unhappy love, and contains the substance of two Buddhist proverbs. Tsuki ni murakumo, hana ni kaze, cloud masses to the moon, wind to flowers, and mama ni naranu wa ukiyo no norai. To be disappointed is the rule in this miserable world. Ukiyo, this fleeting or unhappy world, is one of the commonest Buddhist terms in use. End of footnote. Almost as soon as they bloom, the scented flowers of the plum tree by the wind of this world of change are scattered and blown away. Thinking tomorrow remains, thou heart's frail flower of cherry, how knowest whether this night the tempest will not come? Footnote. Asuarito, omo kakaru no, ada zakura, yowa ni arashi no, fuka no monoko wa. Literal translation. Tomorrow is that, think heart of, perishable cherry flower. This night in storm, blow not. Is it certain? End of footnote. Shadow and shape alike melt and flow back to nothing. He who knows this truth is the Dharma of snow. Footnote. Kage mo katache mo, hiyureba moto no, mitsu to satoruzo. Yuki Daruma. Literal translation. Shadow and shape also, if melt away, original water is, that understands snow Daruma. Daruma, or Dharma, the 28th patriarch of the Zen sect, is said to have lost his legs through remaining long in the posture of meditation, And many legless toy figures, which are so balanced that they will always assume an upright position however often placed upside down, are called by his name. The snowmen made by Japanese children have the same traditional form. The Japanese friend who helped me to translate these verses tells me that a ghostly meaning attaches to the word kage, shadow, in the above. This would give a much more profound signification to the whole verse.
End of footnote. As the moon of the 15th night, the heart till the age 15, then the brightness wanes, and the darkness comes with love. Footnote.
According to the old calendar, there was always a full moon on the 15th of the month. The Buddhist allusion in the verse is to Mayoi, the illusion of passion, which is compared to a darkness concealing the right way.
End of footnote. All things change, we are told, in this world of change and sorrow, but love's way never changes, of promising never to change. Footnote.
Kawaru kiyo ni, kawaranu mono wa, kawaru maeto no, koi no michi. Literal translation. Change, changeable world in, does not change that which, we will never change. Saying of Love of Way.
End of footnote. Cruel the beautiful flash, utterly heartless that lightning, before one can look even twice it vanishes wholly away. Footnote.
Honi tsurenai, ano inatsuma wa, futami minuuchi, kiete yuku. The Buddhist saying, Inazuma no hikari, ishi no hi, lightning flash and flint spark, symbolizing the temporary nature of all pleasures, is here playfully referred to. The song complains of a too brief meeting with a sweetheart or lover.
End of footnote. His very sweetness itself makes my existence a burden. Truly this world of change is a world of constant woe. Footnote.
Words of a loving but jealous woman, thus interpreted by my Japanese friend. The more kind he is, the more his kindness overwhelms me with anxiety lest he be equally tender to other girls who may also fall in love with him.
End of footnote. Neither for youth nor age is fixed the life of the body. Bidding me wait for a time is the word that forever divides. Footnote.
Rosho fujo no, mideyari nagara, jisetsu matetsu wa, kirei kotoba. Literal translation. Old young, not fixed of body being, time wait, to say, cutting word. Rosho fujo is a Buddhist phrase. The meaning of the song is, since all things in this world are uncertain, asking me to wait for our marriage day means that you do not really love me, for either of us might die before the time you speak of.
End of footnote. Only too well I know that to meet will cause more weeping, yet never to meet at all were sorrow too great to bear. Footnote.
Allusion is made to the Buddhist text, Shojahitsumetsu e shajori. Whosoever is born must die, and all who must meet must as surely part. And the religious phrase, Ai betsuriku, sorrow of parting and pain of separation.
End of footnote. Too joyful in union to think, we forget that the smiles of the evening sometimes themselves become the sources of morning tears. Yet, notwithstanding the doctrine of impermanency, we are told in another Dodoitsu that he who is never bewitched by the charming smile of a woman, a wooden Buddha is he, a Buddha of bronze or stone. Footnote.
Much more amusing in the original. Adana e goa ni, meioanu mono wa, kiibutsu, kanabutsu, ishi botoke. Charming smile by, bewildered not, he as for wood Buddha, metal Buddha, stone Buddha. The term ishi botoke especially refers to the stone images of the Buddha placed in cemeteries. This song is sung in every part of Japan. I have heard it many times in different places.
End of footnote. And why a Buddha of wood or bronze or stone? Because the living Buddha was not so insensible, as we are assured, with jocose irreverence in the following. Forsake this fitful world, that was Lord Buddha's, or upside down, teaching. And Ragara, son of his loins, was he forgotten indeed? Footnote.
Rahula.
End of footnote. There is an untranslatable pun in the original, which, if written in Romaji, would run thus. Ukiyo steo ta, Sorya, Shakasama, Sakasama, yo, Ragara, Toyo Kowo, Waserateka. Shakyamuni is the Japanese rendering of Sakyamuni. Shakasama is therefore Lord Sakya, or Lord Buddha, but Sakasama is a Japanese word meaning topsy-turvy, upside down, and the difference between the pronunciation of Shakasama and Sakasama is slight enough to have suggested the pun. Love in suspense is not usually inclined to reverence. Even while praying together in front of the tablet's ancestral, lovers find chance to murmur prayers never meant for the dead. Footnote.
Eko surutote, hotoke no maiye, futari mukaite, konabedate.
Literal translation. Repeat prayers saying, dead of presence in twain facing, small pan cooking. Hotoke means a dead person as well as a Buddha. See my Glimpses of Unfamiliar Japan, the household shrine. Konabedate is an idiomatic expression signifying a lover's tete-a-tete. It is derived from the phrase chinchin kamonabe, cooking a wild duck in a pan. The idea suggested being that of the pleasure experienced by an amorous couple in eating out of the same dish. Chinchin, an onomatope, expresses the sound of the gravy boiling.
End of footnote.
And as for interrupters, hateful the wind or rain that ruins the bloom of flowers, even more hateful far who obstructs the way of love. Yet the help of the gods is earnestly besought. I make my hyakudo, traveling love's dark pathway, ever praying to meet the owner of my heart.
Footnote.
To perform the rite called o hyakudo means to make 100 visits to a temple, saying a prayer each time. The expression, dark way of love, koi no yami, or yamiji, is a Buddhist phrase. Love, being due to mayoi, or illusion, is a state of spiritual darkness. The term, owner of my heart, is an attempted rendering of the Japanese word nushi, signifying master, owner, often also landlord, and, in love matters, the lord or master of the affection inspired.
End of footnote.
The interest attaching to the following typical group of love songs will be found to depend chiefly upon the Buddhist allusions. In the bed of the river of souls, or in waiting alone at evening, the pain differs nothing at all. To a mountain the pebble grows.
Footnote.
Sai no kawarato, nushimatsu yoi wa, koishi ga, yamato naru. A more literal translation would be, in the Sai no Kawara, dry bed of the river of souls, and in the evening, when waiting for the loved one, koishi becomes a mountain. There is a delicate pun here, a play on the word koishi, which, as pronounced, though not as written, may mean either a small stone or longing to see. In the bed of the phantom river, Sai no Kawa, the ghosts of children are obliged to pile up little stones, the weight of which increases so as to tax their strength to the utmost. There is a reference here also to a verse in the Buddhist Wasan of Jizo, describing the crying of children for their parents. Kichi koishi, haha koishi. See Glimpses of Unfamiliar Japan, Volume 1, page 59-61.
End of footnote.
Who furthest after illusion wanders on love's dark pathway is ever the clearest seeing, not the simple or dull.
Footnote.
Clearest sighted, that is, in worldly matters.
End of footnote.
Coldly seen from without, our love looks utter folly. Who never has felt mayoi could never understand. Countless the men must be who dwell in 3,000 worlds, yet among them all is none worthy to change for mine. Footnote.
San zen sekai ni otoko wa aredo, nushi ni mi kaeru, hito wa nai. San zen sekai, the 3,000 worlds, is a common Buddhist expression. Literally translated, the above song runs, 3,000 worlds in, men are, but lover to exchange person is not.
End of footnote. However fickle I seem, my heart is never unfaithful. Out of the slime itself, spotless the lotus grows. Footnote.
The familiar Buddhist simile is used more significantly here than the Western reader might suppose from the above rendering. These are supposed to be the words of either a professional singing girl or of a joru. Her calling is derisively termed a doromizu kagyo, foul water occupation, and her citation of the famous Buddhist comparison in self-defense is particularly and pathetically happy.
End of footnote. So that we stay together, even the hell of the blood lake, even the mountain of swords, will signify nothing at all. Footnote.
Shinoike jikokomo, tsurugi no yamamo, futari zure nara, ito yasanu. The hell of the blood lake is a hell for women, and the mountain of swords is usually depicted in Buddhist prints as a place of infernal punishment for men in especial.
End of footnote. Not yet indeed is my body garbed in the ink-black habit, but as for this heart bereaved, already it is a nun. Footnote.
In the original much more pretty and much more simple, Sumi no koromo ni, ni wa yatsu senedo, kokoro hitotsu wa, ama hoshi. Ink-black koromo, priest or nun's outer robe in body not clad, but heart one nun. Hitotsu, one, also means solitary, forlorn, bereaved. Amahoshi, literal translation, nun priest.
End of footnote. My hair indeed is uncut, but my heart has become a religious. A nun it shall always be till the hour I meet him again. But even the priest or nun is not always exempt from the power of Mayoi. I am wearing the sable garb, and yet, through the illusion of longing, ever I lose my way, knowing not whither or where. So far, my examples have been principally chosen from the more serious class of dodoitsu, but in dodoitsu of a lighter class, the Buddhist allusions are perhaps even more frequent. The following group of 5 will serve for specimens of hundreds. Never can be recalled the word too quickly spoken, therefore with Emma's face the lover receives the prayer. Footnote.
The implication is that he has hastily promised more than he wishes to perform. Emma, or Yama, Sanskrit Yama, is the lord of hell and judge of souls, and, as depicted in Buddhist sculpture and painting, is more than fearful to look upon. There is evident reference in this song to the Buddhist proverb, Karu toki no jitsokeo, nasu toki no emageo. Borrowing time, the face of Jizo, repaying time, the face of Emma.
End of footnote. Thrice did I hear that prayer with Buddha's face, but hereafter my face shall be Emma's face because of too many prayers. Now they are married together, but under their boat is Jigoku. Blow quickly, thou river wind, blow a typhoon for my sake. Footnote.
Jigoku is the Buddhist name for various hells, Sanskrit, narakas. The allusion here is to the proverb, Funai taichi mai shita wa jigoku. Under the thickness of, a single boat plank is hell, referring to the perils of the sea. This song is a satire on jealousy, and the boat spoken of is probably a roofed pleasure boat, such as excursions are made into the sound of music.
End of footnote. Vainly to make him stay, I said that the crows were night crows, the bell of the dawn peals doom, the bell that cannot lie. Footnote.
Tsukiyo garasu, literally translated moon night crows. Crows usually announce the dawn by their cawing,
but sometimes on moonlit nights they caw at all hours from sunset to sunrise. The bell referred to is the bell of some Buddhist temple, the Ake no Kane, or dawn bell, being, in all parts of Japan, sounded from every Buddhist Tera. There is a pun in the original. The expression tsukanai, cannot tell a lie, might also be interpreted phonetically as cannot strike a bell.
End of footnote. This my desire, to kill the crows of 3,000 worlds, and then to repose in peace with the owner of my heart. Footnote.
Sansan sekai no karasu o koroshi, nushito so inaga shite mitai.
End of footnote. I have cited this last only as a curiosity, for it has a strange history, and is not what it seems, although the apparent motive was certainly suggested by some song like the one immediately preceding it. It is a song of loyalty, and was composed by Kido of Choshu, one of the leaders in that great movement which brought about the downfall of the shogunate, the restoration of the imperial power, the reconstruction of Japanese society, and the introduction and adoption of Western civilization. Kido, Saigo, and Okubo are rightly termed the three heroes of the restoration. While preparing his plans at Kyoto, in company with his friend Saigo, Kido composed and sang this song as an imitation of his real sentiments. By the phrase "ravens of the 3,000 worlds," he designated the Tokugawa partisans. By the word nushi, lord or heart's master, he signified the emperor, and by the term soine, reposing together, he referred to the hoped-for condition of direct responsibility to the throne, without further intervention of shogun and daimyo. It was not the first example in Japanese history of the use of popular song as a medium for the utterance of opinions which, expressed in plainer language, would have invited assassination. While I was writing the preceding note upon Kido's song, the Buddhist phrase sansen sekai, twice occurring, as the reader will have observed in the present collection, suggested a few reflections with which this paper may fitly conclude. I remember that when I first attempted years ago to learn the outlines of Buddhist philosophy, one fact which particularly impressed me was the vastness of the Buddhist concept of the universe. Buddhism, as I read it, had not offered itself to humanity as a saving creed for one inhabited world, but as the religion of innumerable hundreds of thousands of myriads of kotis of worlds. Footnote. 1 koti equals 10 million. End of footnote. And the modern scientific revelation of stellar evolution and dissolution then seemed to me, and still seems, like a prodigious confirmation of certain Buddhist theories of cosmical law. The man of science today cannot ignore the enormous suggestions of the new story that the heavens are telling. He finds himself compelled to regard the development of what we call mind as a general phase or incident in the ripening of planetary life throughout the universe. He is obliged to consider the relation of our own petty sphere to the great swarming of suns and systems as no more than the relation of a single noctiluca to the phosphorescence of a sea. By its creed, the Oriental intellect has been better prepared than the Occidental to accept this tremendous revelation, not as a wisdom that increaseth sorrow, but as a wisdom to quicken faith. And I cannot but think that out of the certain future union of Western knowledge with Eastern thought there must eventually proceed a Neo-Buddhism inheriting all the strength of science, yet spiritually able to recompense the seeker after truth with the recompense foretold in the 12th chapter of the Sutra of the Diamond Cutter. Taking the text as it stands, in despite of commentators, what more could be unselfishly desired from any spiritual teaching than the reward promised in that verse? They shall be endowed with the highest wonder. End of section 10. Recording by Corinne LePage.
Section 11 of Gleaning in Buddha Fields. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Dan McAdam. Gleanings in Buddha Fields by Lafcadio Hearn. Chapter 9, Part 1. Nirvana, a Study in Synthetic Buddhism. Quote, "It is not possible, O Subhuti, that this treatise of the law should be heard by beings of little faith, by those who believe in self, in beings, in living beings, and in persons." The Diamond Cutter. There still widely prevails in Europe and America the idea that Nirvana signifies, to Buddhist minds, neither more nor less than absolute nothingness, complete annihilation. This idea is erroneous, but it is erroneous only because it contains half of a truth. This half of a truth has no value or interest, or even intelligibility, unless joined with the other half. And of the other half no suspicion yet exists in the average Western mind. Nirvana indeed signifies an extinction. But if by this extinction of individual being we understand soul death, our conception of Nirvana is wrong. Or if we take Nirvana to mean such reabsorption of the finite into the infinite as that predicted by Indian pantheism, again our idea is foreign to Buddhism. Nevertheless, if we declare that Nirvana means the extinction of individual sensation, emotion, thought, the final disintegration of conscious personality, the annihilation of everything that can be included under the term I, then we rightly express one side of the Buddhist teaching. The apparent contradiction of the foregoing statements is due only to our occidental notion of self. Self to us signifies feelings, ideas, memory, volition, and it can scarcely occur to any person not familiar with German idealism even to imagine that consciousness might not be self. The Buddhist, on the contrary, declares all that we call self to be false. He defines the ego as a mere temporary aggregate of sensations, impulses, ideas created by the physical and mental experiences of the race, all related to the perishable body, and all doomed to dissolve with it. What to Western reasoning seems to be the most indubitable of realities, Buddhist reasoning pronounces the greatest of all illusions, and even the source of all sorrow and sin. Quote, "The mind, the thoughts, and all the senses are subject to the law of life and death. With knowledge of self and the laws of birth and death, there is no grasping and no sense perception. Knowing one's self and knowing how the senses act, there is no room for the idea of I, or the ground for framing it. The thought of self gives rise to all sorrows, binding the world as with fetters. But having found there is no I that can be bound, then all these bonds are severed." The above text suggests very plainly that the consciousness is not the real self, and that the mind dies with the body. Any reader unfamiliar with Buddhist thought may well ask, what, then, is the meaning of the doctrine of karma, the doctrine of moral progression, the doctrine of the consequence of acts? Indeed, to try to study, only with the ontological ideas of the West, even such translations of the Buddhist sutras as those given in the sacred books of the East, is to be at every page confronted by seemingly hopeless riddles and contradictions. We find a doctrine of rebirth, but the existence of a soul is denied. We are told that the misfortunes of this life are punishments of faults committed in a previous life. Yet personal transmigration does not take place. We find the statement that beings are re-individualized, yet both individuality and personality are called illusions. I doubt whether anybody not acquainted with the deeper forms of Buddhist belief could possibly understand the following extracts which I have made from the first volume of The Questions of King Milinda. The king said, "Nagasena, is there anyone who after death is not re-individualized?" Nagasena answered, "A sinful being is re-individualized. A sinless being is not." "Is there, Nagasena, such a thing as the soul?" "There is no such thing as soul." Pages 86 through 89. The same statement is repeated in a later chapter, page 111, with a qualification, "In the highest sense, O king, there is no such thing." "Is there any being, Nagasena, who transmigrates from this body to another?" "No, there is not." Page 112. Where there is no transmigration, Nagasena, can there be rebirth? Yes, there can. Does he, Nagasena, who is about to be reborn, know that he will be reborn? Yes, he knows it, O king. Page 113. Naturally, the Western reader may ask, how can there be re-individualization without a soul? How can there be rebirth without transmigration? How can there be personal foreknowledge of rebirth without personality? But the answers to such questions will not be found in the work cited. It would be wrong to suppose that the citations given offer any exceptional difficulty. As to the doctrine of the annihilation of self, the testimony of nearly all those Buddhist texts now accessible to English readers is overwhelming. Perhaps the Sutra of the Great Deceased furnishes the most remarkable evidence contained in the sacred books of the East. In its account of the 8 stages of deliverance leading to Nirvana, it explicitly describes what we should be justified in calling, from our Western point of view, the process of absolute annihilation. We are told that in the first of these 8 stages, the Buddhist seeker after truth still retains the idea of form, subjective and objective. In the second stage, he loses the subjective idea of form and views form as external phenomena only. In the third stage, the sense of approaching perception of larger truth comes to him. In the fourth stage, he passes beyond all the ideas of form, ideas of resistance, and ideas of distinction, and there remains to him only the idea of infinite space. In the fifth stage, the idea of infinite space vanishes, and the thought comes, it is all infinite reason. Here is the uttermost limit, many might suppose, of pantheistic idealism, but it is only the halfway resting place on the path which the Buddhist thinker must pursue. In the sixth stage, the thought comes, nothing at all exists. In the seventh stage, the idea of nothingness itself vanishes. In the eighth stage, all sensations and ideas cease to exist, and after this comes Nirvana. The same sutra, in recounting the death of the Buddha, represents him as rapidly passing through the first, second, third, and fourth stages of meditation to enter into that state of mind in which the infinity of space alone is present, and thence into that state of mind to which the infinity of thought alone is present, and thence into that state of mind to which nothing at all is specially present, and thence into that state of mind between consciousness and unconsciousness, and thence into that state of mind in which consciousness of both sensation and of ideas has wholly passed away. For the reader who has made any serious attempt to obtain a general idea of Buddhism, such citations are scarcely necessary, since the fundamental doctrine of the concatenation of cause and effect contains the same denial of the reality of self and suggests the same enigmas. Illusion produces action or karma. Karma, self-consciousness. Self-consciousness, individuality. Individuality, the senses. The senses, contact. Contact, feeling. Feeling, desire. Desire, union. Union, conception. Conception, birth. Birth, sorrow and decrepitude and death. Doubtless the reader knows the doctrine of the destruction of the 12 nidanas, and it is needless here to repeat it at length. But he may be reminded of the teaching that by the sensation of contact feeling is destroyed, by that feeling, individuality, and by that of individuality, self-consciousness. Evidently, without a preliminary solution of the riddles offered by such texts, any effort to learn the meaning of Nirvana is hopeless. Before being able to comprehend the true meaning of those sutras now made familiar to English readers by translation, it is necessary to understand that the common Occidental ideas of God and soul, of matter, of spirit, have no existence in Buddhist philosophy, their places being occupied by concepts having no real counterparts in Western religious thought. Above all, it is necessary that the reader should expel from his mind the theological idea of a soul. The text already quoted should have made it clear that in Buddhist philosophy there is no personal transmigration and no individual permanent soul. Gleanings in Buddha Fields by Lafcadio Hearn. Chapter 9, Part 2. Quote, O Bhagavat, the idea of a self is no idea. And the idea of a being, or a living person, or a person, is no idea. And why? Because the blessed Buddhas are freed from all ideas. The Diamond Cutter. Now let us try to understand what it is that dies, and what it is that is reborn. What it is that commits faults, and what it is that suffers penalties. What passes from states of woe to states of bliss. What enters into nirvana after the destruction of self-consciousness, and what survives extinction and has power to return out of nirvana. What experiences the four infinite feelings after all finite feelings have been annihilated. It is not the sentient and conscious self that enters nirvana. The ego is only a temporary aggregate of countless illusions, a phantom shell, a bubble sure to break. It is a creation of karma, or rather, as a Buddhist friend insists, it is karma. To comprehend the statement fully, the reader should know that, in this Oriental philosophy, acts and thoughts are forces integrating themselves into material and mental phenomena, into what we call objective and subjective appearances. The very earth we tread upon, the mountains and forests, the rivers and seas, the world and its moon, the visible universe in short, is the integration of acts and thoughts. It is karma, or at least being conditioned by karma. Footnote. Quote, the aggregate actions of all sentient beings give birth to the varieties of mountains, rivers, countries, etc. Their eyes, nostrils, ears, tongues, bodies, as well as their gardens, woods, farms, residences, servants, and maids, men imagine to be their own possessions, but they are, in truth, only results produced by innumerable actions. Kuroda, Outlines of the Mahayana. Quote, grass, trees, earth, all these shall become Buddha. Chuinkyo. Quote, even swords and things of metal are manifestations of spirit. Within them exists all virtues, or power, in their fullest development and perfection. Hizo Hoyaku. Quote, when called sentient or non-sentient, matter is law body, or spiritual body. Chisho Hisho. Quote, the apparent doctrine treats of the four great elements, earth, fire, water, air, as non-sentient, but in the hidden doctrine these are said to be the Samya Shin, Samyakaya, or body accordant of the Nyorai, Tathagata. Soku Shin Jo Butsugi. Quote, when every phase of our mind shall be in accord with the mind of Buddha, then there will not be even one particle of dust that does not enter into Buddhahood. Engako Sho. End footnote. The karma ego we call self is mind and is body. Both perpetually decay, both are perpetually renewed. From the unknown beginning, this double phenomenon, objective and subjective, has been alternately dissolved and integrated. Each integration is a birth, each dissolution a death. There is no other birth or death but the birth and death of karma in some form or condition. But at each rebirth, the reintegration is never the reintegration of the identical phenomenon, but of another to which it gives rise. As growth begets growth, as motion produces motion. So that the phantom self changes not only as to form and condition, but as to actual personality with every re-embodiment. There is one reality, but there is no permanent individual, no constant personality. There is only phantom self, and phantom succeeds phantom, as undulation to undulation, over the ghostly sea of birth and death. And even as the storming of a sea is a motion of undulation, not of translation, even as it is the form of the wave only, not the wave itself, that travels, so in the passing of lives there is only the rising and the vanishing of forms, forms mental, forms material. The fathomless reality does not pass. All forms, it is written in the Kango Hanya Haramitsu Kyo, are unreal. He who rises above all forms is the Buddha. But what can remain to rise above all forms after the total disintegration of body and the final dissolution of mind? Unconsciously dwelling behind the false consciousness of imperfect man, beyond sensation, perception, thought, wrapped in the envelope of what we call soul, which in truth is only a thickly woven veil of illusion, is the eternal and divine, the absolute reality, not a soul, not a personality, but the all-self without selfishness, the Muga no Taiga, the Buddha enwombed in karma. Within every phantom self dwells this divine, yet the innumerable are but one. Within every creature incarnate sleeps the infinite intelligence, unevolved, hidden, unfelt, unknown, yet destined from all the eternities to waken at last, to rend away the ghostly web of the sensuous mind, to break forever its chrysalis of flesh, and pass to the supreme conquest of space and time. Wherefore it is written in the Kegon Kyo, Avatamsaka Sutra, "Child of Buddha, there is not even one living being that has not the wisdom of the Tathagata. It is only because of their vain thoughts and affections that all beings are not conscious of this. I will teach them the holy way. I will make them forsake their foolish thoughts, and cause them to see the vast and deep intelligence which dwells within them is not different from the wisdom of the very Buddha." Here we may pause to consider the correspondence between these fundamental Buddhist theories and the concepts of Western science. It will be evident that the Buddhist denial of the reality of the apparitional world is not a denial of the reality of phenomena as phenomena, nor a denial of the forces producing phenomena objectively or subjectively. For the negation of karma as karma would involve the negation of the entire Buddhist system. The true declaration is that what we perceive is never reality in itself, and that even the ego that perceives is an unstable plexus of aggregates of feelings, which are themselves unstable and in the nature of illusions. This position is scientifically strong, perhaps impregnable. Of substance in itself we certainly know nothing. We are conscious of the universe as a vast play of forces only. And even while we discern the general relative meaning of laws expressed in the action of these forces, all that which is non-ego is revealed to us merely through the vibrations of a nervous structure never exactly the same in any two human beings. Yet through such varying and imperfect perception we are sufficiently assured of the impermanency of all forms, of all aggregates objective or subjective. The test of reality is persistence. And the Buddhist, finding in the visible universe only a perpetual flux of phenomena, declares the material aggregate unreal because non-persistent, unreal at least as a bubble, a cloud, or a mirage. Again, relation is the universal form of thought, but since relation is impermanent, how can thought be persistent? Judged from these points of view, Buddhist doctrine is not anti-realism, but a veritable transfigured realism, finding just expression in the exact words of Herbert Spencer, every feeling and thought being but transitory, an entire life made up of such feelings and thoughts being also but transitory. Nay, the objects amid which life is passed, though less transitory, being severally in the course of losing their individualities, whether quickly or slowly, we learn that the one thing permanent is the unknowable reality hidden under all these changing shapes. Likewise, the teaching of Buddhism, that what we call self is an impermanent aggregate, a sensuous illusion, will prove, if patiently analyzed, scarcely possible for any serious thinker to deny. Mind, as known to the scientific psychologist, is composed of feelings and the relation between feelings. And feelings are composed of units of simple sensation which are physiologically coincident with minute nervous shocks. All the sense organs are fundamentally alike, being evolutional modifications of the same morphological elements. And all the senses are modifications of touch. Or, to use the simplest possible language, the organs of sense, sight, smell, taste, even hearing, have been alike developed from the skin. Even the human brain itself, by the modern testimony of histology and embryology, is, at its first beginning, merely an infolding of the epidermic layer, and thought, physiologically and evolutionally, is thus a modification of touch. Certain vibrations, acting through the visual apparatus, cause within the brain those motions which are followed by the sensations of light and color. Other vibrations, acting upon the auditory mechanism, give rise to the sensation of sound. Other vibrations, setting up changes in specialized tissue, produce sensations of taste, smell, touch. All our knowledge is derived and developed, directly or indirectly, from physical sensation, from touch. Of course, this is no ultimate explanation, because nobody can tell us what feels the touch. Everything is physical, well said Schopenhauer, is at the same time metaphysical. But science fully justifies the Buddhist position that what we call self is a bundle of sensations, emotions, sentiments, ideas, memories, all relating to the physical experiences of the race and the individual, and that our wish for immortality is a wish for the eternity of this merely sensuous and selfish consciousness. And science even supports the Buddhist denial of the permanence of the sensuous ego. Psychology, says Wundt, proves that not only our sense perceptions, but the memorial images that renew them, depend for their origin upon the function of the organs of sense and movement. The continuance of this sensuous consciousness must appear to her irreconcilable with the facts of her experience. And surely we may well doubt whether such continuance is an ethical requisite, more, whether the fulfillment of the wish for it, if possible, were not an intolerable destiny. Gleanings in Buddha Fields by Lafcadio Hearn. Chapter 9, Part 3. Quote, O Subhuti, if I had had an idea of a being, of a living being, or of a person, I should also have had an idea of malevolence. A gift should not be given by anyone who believes in form, sound, smell, taste, or anything that can be touched. The Diamond Cutter. The doctrine of the impermanency of the conscious ego is not only the most remarkable in Buddhist philosophy, it is also, morally, one of the most important. Perhaps the ethical value of this teaching has never yet been fairly estimated by any Western thinker. How much of human unhappiness has been caused, directly and indirectly, by opposite beliefs, by the delusion of stability, by the delusion that distinctions of character, condition, class, creed are settled by immutable law, and that the delusion of a changeless, immortal, sentient soul destined by divine caprice to eternities of bliss or eternities of fire. Doubtless the ideas of a deity moved by everlasting hate, of soul as a permanent, changeless entity destined to changeless states, of sin as an unatonable, and of penalty as never-ending, were not without value in former savage stages of social development. But in the course of our future evolution they must be utterly got rid of, and it may be hoped that the contact of Western with Oriental thought will have for one happy result the acceleration of their decay. While even the feelings which they have developed linger with us, there can be no true spirit of tolerance, no sense of human brotherhood, no awakening of universal love. Buddhism, on the other hand, recognizes no permanency, no finite stabilities, no distinctions of character or class or race, except as passing phenomena. Nay, no difference even between gods and men, has been essentially the religion of tolerance. Demon and angel are but varying manifestations of the same karma, hell and heaven mere temporary halting places upon the journey to eternal peace. For all beings there is but one law, immutable and divine, the law by which the lowest must rise to place of the highest, and the law by which the worst must become the best. The law by which the vilest must become a Buddha. In such a system there is no room for prejudice and for hatred. Ignorance alone is the source of wrong and pain, and all ignorance must finally be dissipated in infinite light through the decomposition of self. Certainly while we try to cling to the old theories of permanent personality and of a single incarnation only for each individual, we can find no moral meaning in the universe as it exists. Modern knowledge can discover no justice in the cosmic process. The very most it can offer us by way of ethical encouragement is that the unknowable forces are not forces of pure malevolence, neither moral nor immoral, to quote Huxley, but simply unmoral. Evolutional science cannot be made to accord with the notion of indissoluble personality, and if we accept its teachings of mental growth and inheritance, we must also accept its teachings of individual dissolution and of the cosmos as inexplicable. It assures us, indeed, that the higher faculties of man have been developed through struggle and pain, and will long continue to be so developed. But it also assures us that evolution is inevitably followed by dissolution, that the highest point of development is the point likewise from which retrogression begins. And if we are each and all mere perishable forms of being, doomed to pass away like plants and trees, what consolation can we find in the assurance that we are suffering for the benefit of the future? How can it concern us whether humanity becomes more or less happy in another myriad ages, if there remains nothing for us but to live and die in comparative misery? Or, to repeat the irony of Huxley, what compensation does the Eohippus get for his sorrows in the fact that, in some millions of years afterwards, one of his descendants wins the Derby? But the cosmic process may assume quite another aspect if we can persuade ourselves, like the Buddhist, that all being is unity, that personality is but a delusion hiding reality, that all distinctions of I and thou are ghostly films spun out of perishable sensation, that even time and place as revealed to our petty senses are phantasms, that the past and the present and the future are veritably one. Suppose the winner of the Derby quite well able to remember having been the Eohippus. Suppose the being, once man, able to look back through all veils of death and birth, through all evolutions of evolution, even to the moment of the first faint growth of sentiency out of non-sentiency, able to remember, like the Buddha of the Jatakas, all the experiences of his myriad incarnations, and to relate them like fairy tales for the sake of another Ananda. We have seen that it is not the self but the non-self, the one reality underlying all phenomena, which passes from form to form. The striving for nirvana is a struggle perpetual between false and true, light and darkness, the sensual and the supersensual. And the ultimate victory can be gained only by the total decomposition of the mental and physical individuality. Not one conquest of self can suffice. Millions of selves must be overcome. For the false ego is a compound of countless ages, possesses a vitality enduring beyond universes. At each breaking and shedding of the chrysalis, a new chrysalis appears, more tenuous perhaps, more diaphanous, but woven of like sensuous material, a mental and physical texture spun by karma from the inherited illusions, passions, desires, pains, and pleasures of innumerable lives. But what is it that feels, the phantom or the reality? All phenomena of self-consciousness belong to the false self, but only as a physiologist might say that sensation is a product of the sensiferous apparatus, which would not explain sensation. No more in Buddhism than in physiological psychology is there any real teaching of two feeling entities. In Buddhism, the only entity is the Absolute, and to that entity the false self stands in the relation of a medium through which right perception is deflected and distorted, in which and because of which sentiency and impulse become possible. The unconditioned Absolute is above all relations. It has nothing of what we call pain or pleasure. It knows no difference of I and thou, no distinction of place or time. But while conditioned by illusion of personality, it is aware of pain or of pleasure, as a dreamer perceives unreality without being conscious of their unreality. Pleasures and pains and all the feelings relating to self-consciousness are hallucinations. The false self exists only as a state of sleep exists, and sentiency and desire and all the sorrows and passions of being exist only as illusions of that sleep. But here we reach a point at which science and Buddhism diverge. Modern psychology recognizes no feeling not evolutionally developed through the experiences of the race and the individual. But Buddhism asserts the existence of feelings which are immortal and divine. It declares that in this karma state, the greater part of our sensations, perceptions, ideas, thoughts are related only to the phantom self, that our mental life is little more than a flow of feelings and desires belonging to selfishness, that our loves and hates and hopes and fears and pleasures and pains are illusions. Footnote, quote, pleasures and pains have their origin from touch. Where there is no touch, they do not arise. Ataka Vaga 11. End footnote. But it also declares that there are higher feelings, more or less latent within us, according to our degree of knowledge, which have nothing to do with the false self, and which are eternal. Though science pronounces the ultimate nature of pleasures and pains to be inscrutable, it partly confirms the Buddhist teaching of their impermanent character. Both appear to belong rather to secondary than to primary elements of feeling, and both to be evolutions, forms of sensations developed through billions of life experiences out of primal conditions in which there can have been neither real pleasure nor real pain, but only the vaguest of dull sentiency. The higher the evolution, the more pain, and the larger the volume of all sensation. After the state of equilibration has been reached, the volume of feeling will begin to diminish. The finer pleasures and the keener pains must first become extinct. Then by gradual stages the less complex feelings, according to their complexity, till at last, in all the refrigerating planet, there will survive not even the simplest sensation possible to the lowest form of life. But, according to the Buddhist, the highest moral feelings survive races and suns and universes. The purely unselfish feelings, impossible to grosser natures, belong to the Absolute. In generous natures the divine becomes sentient, quickens within the shell of illusion, as a child quickens in the womb, whence illusion itself is called the womb of the Tathagata. In yet higher natures the feelings which are not of self find room for powerful manifestation, shine through the phantom ego as light through a vase. Such are purely unselfish love, larger than individual being, supreme compassion, perfect benevolence. They are not of man, but of the Buddha within the man. And as these expand, all the feelings of self begin to thin and weaken. The condition of the phantom ego simultaneously purifies. All those opacities which darken the reality of mind within the mirage of mind begin to illumine. And the sense of the infinite, like a thrilling of light, passes through the dream of personality into the awakening divine. Footnote. Quote, to reach the state of the perfect and everlasting happiness is the highest nirvana. For then all mental phenomena, such as desires, etc., are annihilated. And as such mental phenomena are annihilated, there appears the true nature of true mind, with all its innumerable functions and miraculous actions. Kuroda, Outlines of the Mahayana. End footnote. But in the case of the average seeker after truth, this refinement and ultimate decomposition of self can be effected only with lentor inexpressible. The phantom individuality, though enduring only for the space of a single lifetime, shapes out of the sum of its innate qualities, and out of the sum of its own particular acts and thoughts, the new combination which succeeds it, a fresh individuality, another prison of illusion for the self without selfishness. Footnote. It is on the subject of this propagation and perpetuation of characters that the doctrine of karma is in partial agreement with the modern scientific teaching of the hereditary transmission of tendencies. End footnote. As name and form, the false self dissolves, but its impulses live on and recombine, and the final destruction of those impulses, the total extinction of their ghostly vitality, may require a protraction of effort through billions of centuries. Perpetually from the ashes of burnt-out passions, subtler passions are born. Perpetually from the graves of illusions, new illusions arise. The most powerful of human passions is the last to yield. It persists far into the superhuman conditions. Even when its grosser forms have passed away, its tendencies still lurk in those feelings originally derived from it or interwoven with it. the sensation of beauty, for example, and the delight of the mind in graceful things. On earth, these are classed among the higher feelings. But in a supramundane state, their indulgence is fraught with peril. A touch or a look may cause the broken fetters of sensual bondage to reform. Beyond all worlds of sex, there are strange zones in which thoughts and memories become tangible and visible objective facts, in which emotional fancies are materialized, in which the least unworthy wish may prove creative. It may be said in Western religious phraseology that throughout the greater part of this vast pilgrimage and in all the zones of desire, the temptations increase according to the spiritual strength of resistance. With every successive ascent, there is a further expansion of the possibilities of enjoyment, an augmentation of power, a heightening of sensation. Immense the reward of self-conquest, but whosoever strives for that reward strives after emptiness. One must not desire heaven as a state of pleasure. It has been written, erroneous thoughts as to the joys of heaven are still entwined by the fast cords of lust. One must not wish to become a god or an angel. Whatsoever brother, O Bhikkhu, the teacher said, may have adopted the religious life thinking to himself, by this morality I shall become an angel, his mind does not incline to zeal, perseverance, exertion. Perhaps the most vivid exposition of the duty of the winner of happiness is that given in the Sutra of the Great King of Glory. This great king, coming into possession of all imaginable wealth and power, abstains from enjoyments, despises splendors, refuses the caresses of a queen dowered with the beauty of the gods, and bids her demand of him, out of her own lips, that he forsake her. She, with dutiful sweetness, but not without natural tears, obeys him, and he passes at once out of existence. Every such refusal of prizes gained by virtue helps to cause a still more fortunate birth in a still loftier state of being. But no state should be desired, and it is only after the wish for Nirvana itself has ceased that Nirvana can be attained. And now we may venture for a little while into the most fantastic region of Buddhist ontology, since without some definite notion of the course of psychical evolution therein described, the suggestive worth of the system cannot be fairly judged. Certainly I am asking the reader to consider a theory about what is beyond the uttermost limit of possible human knowledge. But as much of the Buddhist doctrine as can be studied and tested within the limit of human knowledge is found to accord with scientific opinion better than does any other religious hypothesis, and some of the Buddhist teachings prove to be incomprehensible anticipations of modern scientific discovery, can it therefore seem unreasonable to claim that even the pure fancies of a faith so much older than our own, and so much more capable of being reconciled with the widest expansions of 19th century thought, deserve at least respectful consideration? End of section 11. Recording by Dan McAdam.